A Tall and Small Collection, Chapter 18, Rescue. It had been 2 long weeks since Ashlynn found Soren trapped beneath the bar of the mousetrap. Since then, it had taken every ounce of effort to gain Soren's trust. Even after bandaging his wounds, splinting his leg, giving him food and a place to sleep, and agreeing to his terms and conditions, Soren seemed hesitant to believe that Ashlynn would keep her word and would follow the rules he gave her until recently. Patience was never Ashlynn's strong suit, and it still wasn't, but it was beginning to pay off. Soren was talking more and started accompanying her to the kitchen so they could chat. He was opening up just a little. Soren confided in her that he had a family, something he wouldn't have said a couple of weeks ago. She was starting to sense the smallest inkling of trust blooming between her and the tiny person from the walls. Now, seeing him kneeling on the ground with another even smaller person cradled in his arms, and her picking up on fragmented whispers of conversation, a pang of sadness overwhelmed her. Soren always seemed sure and intelligent, level-headed when presented with an emergency, even if he was cautious and visibly nervous. This was not the person she saw when he turned to her. There were tears in the corners of his eyes. There was a hint and a primal fear, but not for himself, for someone dear to him. The look in his face conveyed uncertainty and desperation. He didn't know what to do, and Ashlynn could see it in his expression. It didn't suit him. Ashlynn. Soren's voice was soft and threatening to crack. She could see he was barely keeping himself composed in front of this other small person. Please, help me save my little brothers. Brothers? Was this little guy Soren's younger brother? It didn't matter at the moment. Ashlynn knew she'd find out later. Soren was asking for help, and she knew she had to help. Those few simple words were all it took to send her into action. Ashlynn nodded, determination burning in her eyes. She stood abruptly, making the one called Dorian flinch and whimper. Ashlynn didn't have time to worry about that, and instead concerned herself with making sure Soren had the necessary tools to clean his brother's injuries. She took a clean dish rag and cut it into small strips Soren could manage while running a bowl of fresh, warm water. She grabbed it, ensuring the water wasn't too hot, and set them on the ground near Soren. You need to make sure his wounds are clean before bandaging them, she said, while keeping her voice low. Compared to Soren, she was doing a poor job of keeping her tone even and calm. She wanted to be sensitive to the situation, but it sounded like time was of the essence. You said brothers. This is one of them, right? Where's the other? I didn't hear. Dorian whimpered again and pushed his face into Soren's chest. Soren, he stammered. What's she gonna do to Ray? Are we captured? Ashlynn felt the familiar frustration that she experienced when first earning Soren's trust, but bit her tongue. There's time for this later, she thought. Soren's arms engulfed his brother as he pressed his cheek on the top of his head. No, we're not captured. She's going to save him. She's going to get him back. It's going to be okay. Soren grabbed a fragment of cut cloth that Ashlynn had placed near him and began wiping away the snot and tears from Dorian's face. Soren turned back to Ashlynn, his breathing becoming more rapid. The older woman in the apartment near yours, somewhere over there. Soren gestured in a broad, sweeping motion toward the other apartments. She has a cat. I don't know her name, but Dorian said that's where they were. Ray, that's my brother's name, is over there. Dorian says Ray got caught in a glue trap. Dorian, is there anything else you can tell me? Dorian sniffed and grasped the cloth near his face. He was wearing the other mouse belt. I thought it would help, like what you taught me. He sniffed, his voice losing strength. Soren knew Ashlynn didn't hear his brother and relayed the information to her, craning his neck to look up into her blue-gray eyes. Dorian said Ray was wearing the mouse pelt, like the one I was wearing, said Soren. Okay, last thing. Is there something I can say to him that would help calm him down? Or maybe help him know I'm not going to hurt him? Asked Ashlynn, preparing to stand and head out. Soren shook his head, the stress of the situation making his shoulders tense and tremble. Just bring him back, please, said Soren softly. And his name is Ray? She asked. Soren nodded. That was all she needed. Ashlynn stood and stepped around them carefully before snagging her keys from the counter and leaving the apartment. Soren watched Ashlynn leave, his mind a mess of emotions. He could only hope that she was able to find his youngest sibling and bring him back safely. Dorian's sniff brought him back to the present. Soren had to focus on what he could control and what he could do, which, at the moment, was cleaning Dorian's wounds and keeping him from losing more blood. Come on, I have to clean these, muttered Soren as he tugged himself to his feet and guided Dorian to the strip of cloth and the bowl of water, where he removed Dorian's shirt carefully and began cleaning the wounds. To his surprise, Dorian resisted slightly and stared at him with some unspoken, unsure look. What happened to you? Did the human do something to you? He asked. Soren gave his brother a momentary, scolding stare before he dipped the cloth into the water and began cleaning the wounds. She didn't do anything to me. She was actually helping me get better, so I could leave and find you, he said stiffly, trying to shake away his thoughts and focus on his brother. Dorian shifted uncomfortably and winced as Soren took his arm and ran the cloth over it. Dad said you'd be different, muttered Dorian, tears welling up in his eyes once again. Soren's jaw clenched as he set aside his festering hatred for Brady, instantly resurfacing. He said you would be more trusting of the humans, and that you'd be tricked into luring us out of the walls like bait. I didn't want to believe it, but... Dorian used his free arm and covered his face as he broke into another round of sobs. Soren sighed and knelt, to the best of his abilities, to be at better eye level with his brother as he grasped his shoulders to lock eyes with him. Dorian, said Soren, firmly but kindly. I haven't changed. I had to improvise in order to survive. Soren took a shaky breath before continuing. You know, she let me go once already, and I went back to our camp in the walls. You were already gone, but she did let me go. She watched me go and didn't try to stop me, even though she could have done so easily. Dorian's eyes peeked up from his arm to stare at his brother. Really? He asked. Soren nodded. But what if it's a trick? Soren smiled reassuringly. No one tricks your older brother, and I promise I will take care of you and Ray no matter what. I will always make sure you're safe. I will always do whatever I can to protect you both. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to get out of the mousetrap and go with you the first time. I promise that won't happen again. Ashlynn was instantly hit with a burst of cold air as she threw open the door and stepped into the snowy exterior of the apartment-filled neighborhood. She knew exactly who Dorian was referring to and made a beeline for her apartment, trudging through the snow all the way toward the older woman's front doorstep. Susan Bonmeyer, or Grandma Susie, as she liked to say, was an elderly lady who lived on her own with her cat, Jada. She had a talent when it came to mending and creating dresses and outfits, and was always kind. It was hard to believe she would set up mousetraps of any type, but she did have a son and grandson who came in town from time to time who might have set out these contraptions. Ashlynn realized she had a problem just as she reached out and knocked on the front door. Soren had always seemed adamant about keeping himself and whatever he was a secret. This meant Ashlynn couldn't go right up and ask if Grandma Susie had seen any small people running around. Thinking of what she was going to say, she tapped on the door briskly again. After a few seconds, the interior door swung open, revealing Grandma Susie. The wrinkles on her face curled into a smile, and the crow's feet by her eyes sent rippling wrinkles to her ears. She adjusted her thick-rimmed spectacles as she opened the door and beckoned Ashlynn inside.
Oh, hello, Ashlynn. Come on in. It's freezing out there,
she said sweetly as she stepped to the side. Ashlynn stepped in after wiping her feet, grateful that the elderly woman's apartment was saturated with heat, which must be costing a fortune.
What a pleasant surprise! I was getting my cards ready for a game. Would you like to join me?
Her voice had an elderly timbre conveying a genuine kind heart. Ashlynn didn't want to refuse, but time was certainly of the essence. "Hello, Grandma Susie. I wish I could stay," she said with an apologetic glance. "But I'm actually doing a favor for a friend. This is kind of embarrassing."
Oh? Well, if there's something I can do, just let me know. Is it something to do with Jordan?
Asked Grandma Susie. Hearing the name made her tense, but Ashlynn forced a weak smile instead. "No, it's over and done with.
Good! I know it hurts, sweetie, but he was no good for you, if I may be so bold to say,"
interrupted Grandma Susie. Though there was truth to what Grandma Susie said, Ashlynn was dealing with far too many emotions as it was to be worrying about that jerk. She laughed nervously and shoved her hands into her pockets to occupy herself. "Actually, no. He's out of the picture. My situation is this. My friend wanted me to watch his mouse, and it managed to get loose. You haven't seen any mice recently, have you?" asked Ashlynn. She watched with dread as Grandma Susie readjusted her glasses and nodded, a sad glimmer in her eye. "Oh, no. No, please, no."
Actually, yes. My grandson, Peter. You remember Peter. Tall brown hair and eyes, marvelous singing voice. Anyway, he noticed a few things out of place and helped set a few of those glue traps. I wanted things to be over and done with, but he insisted that this was more humane.
There was a hollowness to the elderly woman's words which felt like a gut punch and made a sickening feeling rise in her throat. Ashlynn had to focus all her energy on keeping herself composed. "And?" prompted Ashlynn, unable to muster any more words.
Well, I forgot they were there until Jada was nosing around. Poor creature. The little thing already expired, all stuck in the glue and everything. I'm so sorry."
Grandma Susie's words could have brought Ashlynn to her knees. She felt her heart hollow, as if the wind had been knocked out of her from a powerful fall. "No. Oh, gosh, no. Is she just covering up? Did she not notice the legs, the hands? I have to bring him back, at the very least." Ashlynn cleared her throat, slightly shocked to find it so constrained. Well, I know this is an odd request, but what did you do with the body? I'd like to give him a proper burial," asked Ashlynn, scrambling mentally on how she was going to tell Soren if it were too late. Grandma Susie readjusted her glasses awkwardly and pointed to the garage.
"Wrapped it up in a grocery sack and threw it in the bin outside. I wanted to get it taken care of before the trash ran. They must be running late. I haven't heard the trucks roll by. You might still catch it. Really, I'm so sorry, sweetie. I wish I'd have known."
Ashlynn felt her stomach drop. "That's right. It's trash day. It's freezing outside, and it is trash day." Ashlynn glanced back toward the door. "It's okay. I'm sorry, but I do have to go grab him before the trash runs. Thank you so much, Grandma Susie," said Ashlynn. She heard Grandma Susie saying her goodbyes as Ashlynn whisked herself outside into the frigid air. She skidded a few times but caught herself mid-slide as she hurried to the trash cans round back. She prayed silently nothing would be on top of the bag. Sure enough, the trash cans were there at the end of the driveway. She rushed forward, bracing herself, and threw the lid off. Sure enough, there was a small Tide grocery sack right on top. Should she wait to look? No. Ashlynn had to check now. She had to know what to tell Soren. Dread filling her and bringing a sick bile in the back of her throat. Ashlynn reached forward and tugged the tie open. There, At the bottom of the bag was a glue trap with a small figure attached to it. At first glance, it did look like a mouse. However, another glance revealed two small legs and hands poking out from underneath the mouse pelt. The figure was holding eerily still. Ashlynn remembered Soren's rule about touching and holding him, but surely holding the trap wasn't the same as holding them directly. At this rate, she could only hope that Soren would understand. She reached into the bag and pulled the trap from the plastic bag. She had to be careful and tug the plastic bag free from some of the glue edges. Ashlynn also had to make sure she didn't jostle the trap or Soren's brother, Ray, too much. Holding her breath, she held the trap level near her face and focused all of her energy on not shivering and detecting anything. No movement. Ashlynn's heart ached terribly in her chest, staring at the small figure when she noticed something. It was almost lost to her eyes, the slightest twitch from the head. She inspected closer, now noticing how the face of the mouse pelt was folded and pressed into the glue. It made a perfect pocket for someone's head. Another gust of icy, cold wind blew past them, and the little arms poking out from the mouse pelt shook, almost imperceptibly. Then she heard it, a soft whimper. Ray was alive. She could have leapt for joy if she weren't terrified about slipping on the ice and jostling the injured tiny person. Ashlynn closed the trash can lid and held the glue trap close to her chest, careful not to press Ray further into the sticky substance. Her movement, combined with the frigid air, was undoubtedly terrifying the small boy. There were now more audible sobs coming from the trap in her hand. It also looked like he was struggling against the glue, but getting nowhere. It was obvious Ray didn't lose his fighting spirit. Just like his brother, Ashlynn thought. She bit her lip and looked at the squirming child. Speaking to him might make him freak out, but I can't just let him think he's going to get hurt or worse. Ray? It's okay. You're going to be okay. I'm taking you to Soren, said Ashlynn as softly and reassuringly as she could. It didn't work. As expected, Ashlynn heard more powerful sobs coming from Ray and saw him starting to struggle harder in the glue. It was obvious his entire front was stuck to the trap as if he had fallen face first into the adhesive. This is going to be another long night. With that, Ashlynn began carefully walking back to the safety of her apartment as quickly as she dared with the sobbing, terrified rescue in her hands.